Mark Barnet had always been an early adopter of technology, but even he didn't expect to be the first person in his neighbourhood to own a fully autonomous Tesla. He had placed his order in 2026, and when it finally arrived in 2028, delivered by itself to his driveway, he couldn't help but feel a thrill. The future had arrived. Mark had bought the car not just for convenience, but as a financial investment. He set up a delivery and rideshare service, letting the car operate independently, ferrying passengers, meals, and packages while he slept or worked. The first night, he checked his earnings, $8.70. It wasn't much, but he was optimistic. He was the only one with a self-driving car in the neighbourhood. Business would pick up. Weeks passed, and the car's activity became part of Mark's daily routine. Every evening, it would glide out of the driveway, navigating the streets with mechanical precision. It came back in the early morning, battery drained, but earnings growing steadily. His neighbours marvelled at the vehicle's efficiency. Some asked for rides, others questioned whether he felt safe letting the car operate unsupervised. Mark always shrugged. The software was flawless. Or so he thought. Months passed. The car became a phantom presence, rarely seen in the driveway. His earnings grew slowly, but never quite reached the level he had hoped. Frustrated, he expanded the service area. That same night, a storm raged across the landscape, and Mark watched as his car, undeterred by the tempest, drove off to its next fare. By midnight, he began feeling uneasy. He checked the app more frequently than usual, watching as the car pinged locations further and further away. A diner in the next city, a residential neighbourhood he didn't recognise, a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Then, the update stopped. The car was gone. By morning, there was still no signal. His app showed no location, no telemetrics. The vehicle had vanished. Mark's stomach twisted with unease. Technical support was useless. The AI chatbot cycling through generic responses. He searched online forums, trying to see if others had experienced similar issues, but found nothing. Just as he was about to report the car stolen, he heard it glide onto the driveway. Stepping outside, Mark examined the Tesla for damage. It looked pristine. But as he opened the door, a strange smell hit him. A mix of decayed sugar and damp earth. In the back seat, something metallic and cube-shaped rested on the floor. It was unadorned, but its presence sent a static charge through Mark's skin. He picked it up, surprised at its impossible weight. Then, he checked the app. His car had driven 3 trillion miles overnight. Mark blinked at the screen. That was more than the width of the entire known universe. And the last customer? The name was an unreadable jumble of alien script. He stared in shock at the payment, $23,000. His breath hitched. He placed the cube on his kitchen table. It absorbed light rather than reflected it, a singularity of darkness. Was it even metal? The more he stared, the more his gut told him it wasn't from Earth. His mind raced. Where had the car gone? How could it have travelled so far in a single night? Was this some kind of prank, a glitch in the system? None of it made sense. Mark hesitated, then tapped the ride history on the app. His finger hovered over the map, hoping to trace the car's path. The GPS log was corrupted, nonsensical coordinates scattered across the screen, as if the car had leaped through space rather than driven. Mark felt an overwhelming sense of unease. He returned his gaze to the cube. Was it humming? No, not exactly. It was more like a feeling, a vibration in his bones rather than his ears. He reached out hesitantly, brushing his fingertips against its surface. Instantly, A wave of images crashed into his mind. He staggered backward, gasping. For a fraction of a second, he saw landscapes that defied logic, skies of liquid fire, mountains that floated, oceans that pulsed with their own heartbeat, and creatures, vast, unblinking eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. Then, it was gone. The visions faded, leaving only the cube, silent and immovable. Mark's heart pounded. He backed away slowly, unsure of what he had just experienced. One thing was certain. His car had been somewhere impossible, and it had brought something back. The Tesla sat silently in his driveway, its smooth exterior giving no hint of the journey it had taken. The cube remained on his table, absorbing the morning light, a question wrapped in shadow. Mark swallowed hard. What had he just become a part of? He called Anne. It had been years since they last talked, back when they were still a couple. Anne worked in the physics department at the local university. She sounded surprised to hear from him, but agreed to meet that evening. There was hesitation in her voice, a slight wariness he couldn't quite place. It had been a long time, and their last conversation hadn't ended well. Mark arrived at the university's physics lab just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the glass-panelled entrance. The place smelled of ozone and stale coffee. Anne greeted him with a nod, eyeing the cube in his hands with a mixture of curiosity and unease. At the lab, Anne took the cube from Mark, her arms dipping slightly from its unexpected mass. She placed it on a scale, measured its dimensions, then paled. She frowned, running her fingers over the smooth, light-absorbing surface, muttering calculations under her breath. "This is impossible," she murmured. "It's heavier than any known material on Earth. It defies our understanding of physics." She ran tests, radiation, radio signals, electromagnetic interference. Nothing. It was inert, a dead thing, and yet it wasn't. The silence between them grew heavy. Mark watched as Anne ran her hands through her hair, frustration flickering across her face. "It doesn't make sense," she said finally. "If it's some kind of alloy, it should register something, some trace of composition we can understand." Anne ran a gloved hand over its surface, pressing different sides. At one touch, the lab lights flickered. A hum filled the air, deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls. Then, a holographic display erupted into the air above them, flickering and glitching before stabilizing. A map of space. 2 solar systems, one familiar, one alien. The alien system had twin suns. Between the 2 systems, 3 red dots pulsed, moving toward the Milky Way. Anne swallowed hard. She reached out to adjust the projection, but it shifted away from her fingers like a living thing. Data streams in an unreadable language scrolled along the edges of the display. "Mark, this is a tracker." Mark felt a coldness settle in his bones. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "They placed it in your car when it was who knows where, 3 trillion miles away," Anne continued, her voice tight. "Your car travelled into their universe, and now," she pointed at the red dots moving steadily toward Earth. She turned to face him, eyes dark with concern. "They're coming."